Good evening, and thank you all for joining us this evening. We are having a wonderful program here on blackdoctor.org. As you know, I am Ellis Dean, a regular face here on blackdoctor.org Facebook Live. And tonight we have a unique program. So I'm really excited, both as a person that works for Black Doctor, but also as a parent and as a concerned citizen of any community. We need to have this type of discussion. So really excited to have that. So before we get started with tonight's discussion, I want to make sure we've got a couple of instructions we'd like for you to do, and that is to let us know where you're watching from. So this what we're going to be talking about tonight can be applied across the nation. So let us know. Drop it in the comment section. Shout out your city, your town, your school. If you want to put your school in there, put your school in there. Also, if you know someone that could use this information, tag them and share this program with a friend, because we need to get this information out to as many people as possible, particularly in our community. And finally, ask questions. If you have questions that you need answered, that you want to have answered about a situation that you might be going through, your child might be going through, a friend's child might be going through, please ask those questions so we can get them answered. So I know you didn't come to watch this and hear me ramble on, so we're going to get right into the discussion. We have two wonderful guests with us. Both of them are administrators in a school system, in the great state of Texas. And this is Lakeisha Culper. If you remember Lakeisha Culper, she has been with us before. She was a contributor on a previous program, and she was so great. Y'all had such a wonderful response. We're like, we got to bring her back. And then when Ms. Culpepper said, can I bring a friend? I said, you can bring a friend. You get a +1 anytime you want to, Ms. Culpepper. So she brought along Miss E with us, and so they're going to be a part of this discussion tonight. And I didn't even say what we're going to be talking about, and that is bullying. So, Ms. Culpepper, Ms. E, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us. We're super excited to be here again, all the way from the big T, big D. I can't decide how we decide what to call ourselves. So thank you so much for this opportunity, especially on this topic, which is crucial, vital, and important. And we see, especially now, in the midst of COVID, I won't say in the end of COVID, although I'm sure people believe it's eradicated and we've cut the corner. I hope it's true. But looking at numbers from day to day, in the midst of this pandemic, we know this topic is more important now than ever.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And so, what really, two things kind of brought on us doing this discussion tonight. And the first thing was, it's October. And I know everybody wants to wear pink during October. And Susan G. Komen has co-opted October for breast cancer awareness. And God bless that, because we got a breast cancer program coming up tomorrow night, 7 p.m. So you're going to watch that. Hey, we're good with that. But also, there are other things that go on in the month of October. And the month of October is National Bullying Awareness Month. And many people don't know that. And so we wanted to pay some respect to that particular topic this month. Additionally, there was an incident in the state of Texas earlier this month. And it's sad to say that in this country, we have gotten a little too numb to shootings happening, but this one was unique, and it was unique. It was a school shooting. It happened at a school, and it was unique because this particular child that committed the shooting was being bullied, and the person that was the target of the shooting was the person that had allegedly beat this young man, and they said he had been robbed twice. And his story is that he had notified administration, and he had told his parents, and I guess according to his actions, whatever transpired was not satisfactory in terms of his feeling safe. And really, that's what it's about. Bullying is about, we've got to get rid of bullying, and we've got to make more people aware of it. So all students are safe, no matter, what gender, what ethnicity, what income level, no matter what's going on. Bully, it goes across all of those lines, and it is really becoming more more predominant. And I don't say more predominant, but it is a challenge, especially when you add social media and cyber into the equation. 'Cause when I was younger, we didn't have all that. It was just, they just chased you from the bus to your house, and if you was fast enough, you wouldn't you wouldn't go catch it. So I'm gonna throw out the first question, and either one of you can take it. We'll start with you, Ms. Culpepper. How is bullying actually defined? What is technically bullying?
Yeah, so that's a great question. What I can tell you is, like many things, the definition of bullying has been very fluid, right? So I'll also back up just a bit, and I will say the incident that occurred here in Texas was not at our district
Mhm.
specifically. But I will say this, that any incident of violence at a school is everybody's business, right?
Yes.
So let me say that we're just kind of preface what I'm saying with that statement. But for us, the definition of bullying is, and I'm going to read it verbatim because again, it is fluid and it's changed with the times, kind of what you indicated with cyber access that's modified. But it's bullying is defined as a single significant act or a pattern of acts by one or more students directed at another student that exploits an imbalance of power and involves engaging in written or verbal expression through electronic means or physical conduct that, and then we go into some criteria. The first being that it's harmful to the other student, right? That it is severe and persistent. It's materially or substantively disruptive to that
Mhm.
student in their environment, and it infringes on their rights and sets them up to feeling victimized, right? So that's a pretty lengthy definition.
Right.
But for us, in essence, we don't tell a parent that your child feels like they were bullied, but they weren't. Like, that's not our place to say.
Right.
If a parent comes to you, if a student comes to you and says, I feel as if I'm being mistreated, even if they don't use the word bullying, we take that very serious. And yes, the definition governs what policies and action steps we have to take, and we follow that to the letter of the law, like every other district does. But above everything else, we're concerned with the social, emotional, mental, and academic well being of students. And so, whether it's severe in your eyes and my eyes, right? If it's severe to that family, it should be taken seriously. And that's the trick. These
Right.
words that we use in the definition from district to district can really be objective if we're not careful. And
Right.
so we want to handle everything as if it is the most important thing that child is dealing with, because in their world, in their mind and heart, it is.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Is he?
Yes, and just to add on to that comment, um, we want all of our students to feel safe and secure when they come to school. So anything that we have to do or put in place in order to make that happen, it's going to have to happen. So just as a Culpepper said, and we're not the masters of what is bullying and what is not bullying. We know that there's those keywords like imbalance of power and
Right.
repeated action. So we know it's those key words, but just as mentioned, if a student does not feel safe in the learning environment, then that's, we need to put in action steps in order to make sure that that student and that family feels comfortable in our community and in our schools. So that's one thing that we want to really emphasize, that yes, there is a definition to bullying, but we don't want to put it in a box when it comes to dealing with human beings and students and kids.
So it sounds like it sounds like what you read, Ms. Culpepper, was the legal department's definition of what bullying is, because it has to be defined legally. So we all know that. But then there's also that really emotional bullying that say if a child is feeling uncomfortable, if they're feeling some stress and trauma about going to school, that could be a sign, and we'll talk about signs later on in the program, but we're really talking about what's happening in terms of the relationships between students on the campus, or sometimes in the case of cyberbullying, off campus. And so if that relationship is where one is there's an imbalance of power being created and sustained by one or multiple students, then potentially have a case of bullying. And so that's really kind of the layman's version of of all the legalities that goes into bullying.
Yeah.
Um, so, I'm operating from two standpoints. So I'm operating from the standpoint as a parent with a child that's in high school that understands that, and my child is not very big, and so um, he could be susceptible to attacks. Are there any things that kids could be doing, or kids, or is it just random in terms of, are there any things kids that could be doing that are more protective in nature to stop themselves from being bullied, or is that something that is just random and the bully is going to be a bully?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dr. Dean, honestly. And what I'm going to say is two things. Like the first thing is um yes and no, right? We what we do is we create the space for our children to uniquely be themselves. And we give them permission and power to use their own voice, right? So I like to say permission and power. So as a parent, I give my child permission to say no to whomever they need to say no to at any time, right? And the power to really exercise that no to the fullest extent, which includes getting up and walking out of class for my kids, right? Because the one of the things that we've seen, especially now, if you recall, like for a year, maybe two, many of our kids went virtual and weren't together. So we had for our kids, it was 2 years or a year and a half for us. For them, it felt like an eternity. They were not having to interact and deal with each other
Mm-hmm.
in this close setting called a classroom, right?
Right.
Our classrooms were either completely virtual or we were at only maybe 50%, which you might have had 10 kiddos in a class together. And so some of what we're seeing now is them trying to reacclimate to just having people in their space. And so they're almost having to build up their stamina for dealing with other people around them. Like
Right.
that is something I think we have to acknowledge. And so talking to your children about understanding what are your personal limits, what is it about the situation or the classroom that's overwhelming for you, what's truly bothering you, really trying to get a full picture and understand. And sometimes, depending on the age of your child, they can't articulate what it is. And
Right.
so you've got to work with the teacher to fill in those gaps to really understand, is this an individual child or a group of children bullying or negatively engaging with my child, or is this something else that we need to delve in? But beyond that, it's really got to be you as a parent talking to your child, understanding what's going on with them, and empowering them to talk back and speak up for themselves, and not necessarily waiting till they get home to tell you someone's bothering them. But if there's something in the class that they don't like, giving them permission and power to say, stop that right now, I don't like that. Right.
Right.
And that seems like a big thing, but so many of our children, and we see this on social media, so many adults have lost that skill, the skill to disagree and tell people that that's enough, we're not going to go any further, is a hard thing. But I don't want to monopolize the conversation. I'm sure Miss E has so much to share too.
Yeah, I totally agree. Empowering students to have a voice, to be able to defend themselves and to show how they want to be treated and to tell others how they want people to treat them. Everyone has the right to be able to do that. And I also think that some of the burden lies on us as educators to be preventative in nature when it comes to bullying instead of reactive. So in educating parents, educating students on signs of bullying, this is what you can do, giving them, providing resources, also helps to provide a protective layer around our students as they continue to delve into and go through this thing called school, right? So I
Right.
just that it also is that some things that the student can do, but then it's also a burden that lies on us as the district and the educators to be able to utilize those preventative measures to even stop it from even happening in the first place.
You're unpacking a lot there, right? Because you're saying, okay, we've got to give, raise children that are secure enough to have that permission and power, right? So we got to recognize that. We also, as schools, are now trying to re-enter back into the classroom after being out for somewhere to up to, some kids up to 2 years,
Yes.
and they're having to relearn how to engage in the classroom again, right? Because these
Yes.
are these are
Yes.
children. When adults have to relearn how to engage in the office setting, a child has to relearn how to engage appropriately in the classroom. So you got that piece of it.
Absolutely.
And then as
Absolutely.
an administrator, as a school administrator, teachers or whatnot, they're relearning, they're re-engaging. And this is one more thing that they have to pay attention to. They have to pay attention to all the children's behavior. Is there behavioral changes? Is there something that's happening? Did this child go from participating in class and not participating in class? Is there? And so that's just a lot.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
It
Yes.
seems almost impossible, but it's not. I mean, it's not impossible because we're rooting it out. But it does seem like there has to be all in. All hands have to be on deck. Parents, teachers, administrators, as well as other students, if they're witnessing bullying, to be able to speak up and give them permission and power to speak up on a student's behalf that may or may not be uh, feel comfortable doing that.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many layers to being able to have a plan in order to protect our students. Even as a school, when I was a school counselor before I got my position at the district level, I taught my students about bullying in guidance lessons, but I also had parent meetings in order to help parents to recognize the signs of bullying and what they could do if their child was showing these signs. So it's really a heavy education piece, but it's something that we all have to be able to all hands on deck. Everyone needs to participate. Just like it says, it takes a village to raise a child, and that is so true. It takes
Right.
all of us. We're a team. I always say we're teams. So we're a team with the parents, we're a team with the administrators, and so as a team, we make a plan in order to keep our kids safe.
Okay, so Ms. Culpepper, what do you say to those old school parents that say, just fight back if you're being bullied? If your child is being bullied, everybody's got a story about their mama saying, I was being bullied when I was a kid, and my mama sent me back outside, told me, don't come back home until you whooped them. Okay, so we know that that's a narrative out there in the space, right? We know that's a narrative. What do you say to those parents and to those people that just say, "Oh, just tell your child to fight back and they'll be all right"?
And I love that question, Dr. Dean, because I get that a lot. I got that just today. So what I tell families that approach me or even say that this is our plan, this is our strategy, if something might happen, like even when things might not necessarily be going on with their family at the time, what I tell people is, number one, I can't tell you what to do in your home. You run your own house, right? And how and what you tell your children to do, that's going to be between you and your household. So that is,
Right,
in fact, what some people tell their children today.
right,
And I don't disagree with them. But what I tell them is, and really it's a question, is your child the type of child who is going to fight back? And what happens if in that day they're afraid to fight back or unwilling to fight back? Then what's the solution? So it goes back to what Miss E is talking about. I spend a great deal of time in my department really talking through those scenarios with parents because it is a gap for some of our parents and they see it differently. And it's kind of like what you hit on a little bit, Dr. Dean, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with size from what I've seen, but there are some children that are more passive.
right.
And out of my three children that I have, I've got one that probably would just fight. I've got one that will just get fought, and I've got one that's somewhere in between, right? And so all of our children are different. And while back then we thought everybody had to be a fighter to survive, and maybe on some levels, Dr. Dean, we did, depending on where we grew up. Like I was born in Chicago. I feel like we did have to fight. Like it wasn't an option. But our kids are growing up in suburbs. They're growing up in different places.
Yeah.
Where that may not be their natural bend. That may not be who they are fundamentally and what they know how to do. So then what? So now what skills are you going to give them? And how are you going to empower them? And what weapons are they going to use that don't require them to bring a firearm to school? And so those are really the conversations I have with parents. And I do ask them oftentimes, what that's what you think, but what would your child say in this situation? If I were to ask your child, how would they respond?
Right.
And just really getting them to explore that and have that conversation with me sometimes is a hurdle to get parents to understand perhaps my child is not the next Muhammad Ali. They might be a peacemaker. So now what do we do to make sure my child is just as safe as little Layla Ali?
Right.
I saw a comedian one time, and he was on a talk show, and he said something that I thought was really, it stuck with me. And he said he hates cell phones. And the reason why he hated cell phones is because it removes the feeling of being what it really feels like to be mean to someone. And so he's saying is that, hey, somebody posts a picture on Instagram or a video on TikTok, and you could put a mean comment and not have to see how that person responded to those comments. And then you can say, oh, wow, that for some people, that can, oh, I don't have to feel the consequences of being mean to that person. Whereas if I walked up to you and said, boy, your hair looks terrible today, and I see your reaction, now I've got to experience your reaction, and now I've got to process that. Social media, you don't have to do that. You could become a keyboard warrior and just blast folks all day long without facing the consequences on your emotional state to say, I hurt that person's feelings, and now I've got to be able to reconcile the fact that I hurt their feelings. So let's talk about cyberbullying and how that has really escalated bullying behavior beyond your point, because now you can get more than just the one or two or three kids jumping on somebody. You can get an entire school, kids that don't even know a person, because you got videotape being jumped, and now it's on social media, and everybody's talking about how sorry you are and blah blah blah, and you've got to experience that. So let's talk about how is social media and cyberbullying really changed the perspective and landscape of bullying behaviors.
Yeah, it has. I think it goes without saying. I mean, you kind of wrapped it up. It goes without saying that, wow, that it has changed the game in
Right.
bullying, because before it was just like you said, two or three people that witnessed some kind of altercation or some kind of situation or incident. But then when you put it on social media, it can be thousands of people that
Yeah.
witness that and are commenting on it. So it just ups the ante, so to speak, in how it makes that person that's being bullied feel. That's why
Right.
we have all of these situations with suicidal ideations. That's why we have students who get violent
Yeah.
because of lashing out. So I think social media has exacerbated the actual response of students that are actually being bullied in just such a way that it's kind of hard to put a cap on it, to keep that under wraps, just because it just explodes and goes out so easily into so many people. And so it really gives a challenge to the school districts and the administrators and parents. It gives a challenge to those individuals that are trying to kind of stop bullying. It just challenges us to find new and unique ways to be able to help students that are affected by cyberbullying. But it is very difficult. It's hard because of the reach that social media does have. So it just makes us have to think about different ways in order to help to protect kids when they're going through those situations.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm finding that's so interesting, because it's not only that keyboard warrior, right? But it's
Right.
also the keyboard warrior with absolute anonymity. Help me with the word. Y'all know what I'm talking
Anonymity.
Yes.
Anonymity.
about. Completely
Anonymous.
anonymous.
Anonymity. Yeah, you know
Yeah,
what I'm
not
talking. Y'all know what I'm talking.
Completely anonymous. We were going to have to stumble over a word today. So here's my thing. So literally, I had a family come in, and the child is being targeted, but because of these apps that you have where you can clone yourself, where you can
Mm,
hide your identity, trying to track down exactly who's at the root of it becomes a full-time job, right? And
right.
there are people, police officers specifically, who specialize and go to school for this, for basically trying to track down a kid who may be living in Texas, but who's bouncing, their signal from 17 other countries. I couldn't do it, but they're doing it like it's nothing. so that
Right.
they could anonymously target and abuse other children, right? So
Wow.
it's that layer as well, so that when we work to try to prevent and deal with the issue, even figuring out who to deal with is becoming more complicated because we've got to track down individuals using IP addresses and all of this technology and all of these skills that, again, your average school administrator may not be well versed in
Right.
order to even figure out which parents to call to address the issue. But one of the things I'm going to tell you that I've noticed, and this would be my really question to your audience and really ask, is I've often found that families come to me with children who have been cyberbullied or who are dealing with cyberbullying, and that child walks in my office with a cell phone still in their hand with those apps on. So the
Mm.
kid that's being targeted is still watching the comments every day and still looking at it every day and reading it and wanting to show it. And to me, that's equally as disturbing because I
Right.
also worry that if your child is being targeted, let's say on a Snapchat or some one of those apps of that nature, to then allow that child to continuously be on it and still use it worries me as well. And I've had parents
Right.
say, well, but they want to talk to their other friends. So it's very difficult when the very place where you're not safe and are being bullied is the place you long to be to interact. And
Yeah.
that just adds to it, like this layer of complexity that is beyond me because it's like you going from home, from school growing up. If I knew that there was a bully on that corner, I'd go around. Like I go 2 streets over to get to the bus
Right.
stop.
Mhm.
Whereas
Yeah.
now kids are still immersed in the very technology and the very apps where they're being tormented. And that's to me that is perplexing and something I don't know that I fully understand, except
Right.
for that it is addictive. And we attended a workshop here that our Children's Advocacy Center puts on, and they talk about cyber safety and things you can do. And one of the things they said is that most of these apps have an age disclaimer. And for most of them, they really are encouraging children to be 16 or 18 to get on them. But
Right.
we see usage from our children as young as 7 and 8,
Right.
because developmentally, you're hooked and addicted to the stimulation and the socialization you get on that app. So
Hmm.
that even when you're targeted there, you can't seem to break away from it. It's very frightening.
Yeah, and just from a medical mental health standpoint, it is like somebody when I was working with drug abusers, and one of the things that we would always ask when they would come in, I would say, "Well, what are you going to do with that time?" And they would know. They were like, "What do you mean? What do you mean?" And I'd be like, "Well, you're spending a lot of time thinking about drugs, using drugs,
Right.
finding money to get drugs, going to buy drugs. It's a cycle. That takes a lot of time of your day. When you get off drugs, all of that time that was spent is still there. Time doesn't dissipate, doesn't go away. But if you don't fill that time with something else, the likelihood of you relapsing and going back to drugs increases tremendously because you got a lot of time. And then that, like my mom used to say, I don't mind, it's the devil's workshop, right? So we
Mhm.
would, and so that was one of the things that the first questions we would ask, what are you going to do with that time? And then we would help them find activities to offset that time that they were spending. So we have to do our kids the same way. We have to tell them, okay, we're going to get them off of social media or reduce their usage of social media. We've got to find activities and things for them to do to fill that time that is going to be satisfactory to that need that's being filled by social media because it's a socialness. There's some interaction that happened there. I hear my son all the time with his friends playing video games. They've got it. They're FaceTiming each other and all that other stuff. That's not social media. So we're perfectly okay with that. But that's that interactive, and that phone is the gateway
Yeah,
to interaction,
it is.
especially during the pandemic. It really increased during the pandemic.
Oh, right, right.
So now
Wow.
it
It's
just
ridiculous.
becomes
And I hear it's like it sounds like like I think you're right. It's the development of replacement behavior,
yes,
right? And so that I think that is Dr. D. I think that was very powerful, and that's going to be a takeaway for me. because you're right. Now, what do I do? And
Right.
what safe places can I go online?
Right.
Because it does seem like just as soon as you feel like it's a safe place to be, I won't talk like, even as much as we love Facebook and these types of platforms, for some people, they have to take a break from the social media. Like I know I do. Like, I'm just going to get off for a little bit because y'all are
Right.
making me crazy. Right.
Right.
Because as much as I want it to be a positive place where I can socialize, learn, and engage with family and friends, every now and then things come across my timeline that don't inspire me to excellence. And so
Exactly.
I have to break away, right?
Right. Right. And what happens on social media is the algorithms. You start clicking on things, and there's been studies shown that even just the pictures of models affects a child, especially a girl child's self-esteem. Right.
Yes.
And so they're not even getting bullied by friends, but they're being partially bullied by
Images on media.
Beauty
images
standards, yeah.
Yeah.
on social media. They feel like they have to live up to the standard, and so they develop a lower self-esteem, and then that could open them up to being bullied because their self-esteem has been lowered just by scrolling through whatever they're looking at on Instagram or whatever videos they're watching
Yeah.
on TikTok and whatnot. And so really, there's a couple of questions. I want to get to those questions as well. One of the questions is about the LGBTQIA community, and as we are opening up and saying, "Hey, look, we're going to be more inclusive in the classrooms and allow that space," because we know the statistics that if the earlier a child is able to express their orientation, the better chance they have for not committing suicide. And the more they hold that in, the suicide rate potentiality goes up. So how do we open that up to where we create a safe space for them, but don't put them in a situation where they're going to open themselves up to be bullied as a result of coming out with their orientation?
And I'm going to tell you, that is so hard. And Missy, I know you're going to want to jump in. What I can tell you is it goes back to where we started. You and I and those people who are practitioners of this work understand those stats, they understand those trends. But what happens, and I tell parents this all the time, the school is the intersection of everyone's home, beliefs, ideas, ideals, fears, and traumas. We all merge together in this place. And it goes back to what Miss E is talking about. Schools work to be preventative. We work, and districts have policies in place. Like we set definitions, and we're legally obligated to do that for this very reason, so that we can then develop policies that are inclusive and create safe spaces. It becomes very tricky because not every family honors the safe space for every other family. Not only in this topic, but we also saw it just in the simple act of determining if you should wear a mask or not. When
Right.
we come together in school, our differing views collide. And so it's not going to only require our staffs and our teachers to continue to be preventative and well trained, and us to have those conversations with students, but we've really got to get back to some basics in talking to our communities and our parents about how we approach these topics. Because I'm going to tell you, we hear a lot of it from that source, not necessarily from the kids in the room, but from the parents who take issue with anything that happens in a classroom that they disagree with.
Right.
Right. Yeah. That was a really good point, Culpepper. And what I've noticed as far as in our guidance and counseling department, people equate them not agreeing with a certain value as them going against that value in a negative way. And so what we've tried to set up is, and we've created presentations for our counselors to be able to present to parents, faculty, staff, and students about acceptance. Even though you may not necessarily agree as far as your values, this is no reason to act in a negative way towards another human being. So kind of setting that standard and setting that as a guiding light in our district for students and all of our stakeholders, it can help us to move towards an understanding of that we are human beings. Everyone is different one way or the other,
Right.
but we're still human beings. And even if you don't necessarily agree with what someone does, that doesn't mean you have to lash out, bully, or react to them in a negative way. You can allow them to be who they are because you're allowed to be who you are. So just helping students, faculty members, parents understand that is a move in the right direction. Now, is that going to affect everybody, or is that going to help everyone? No, duh. you know,
Right. Right.
it's it's definitely not. But at least as a district, we stand on a principle and we can back that up. So if anyone is negatively responding to individuals in certain communities in a certain way, then we have policies set in place that we can make sure that that is not tolerated in our district. So it's really a fine line between helping students to feel safe and also helping everyone to feel honored in what their values may be that they're learning from home.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna talk about the elephant in the room. So we are here on Black Doctor. What role does ethnicity play in bullying behaviors? And what I'm asking about that is because there's always this kind of no snitching policy, unspoken rule amongst the Black community that you just don't snitch, right? That's not, snitches get stitches. We've heard all the cliches that get thrown out there. Um, in our community, when I was counseling at a high school, that was a serious thing. You just didn't tell. You saw people get phones get taken, things get taken, and you just didn't tell. And they would, but it was really, and I had to create a safe space that they weren't going to get called out, because if they found out that people found out that they were the one that told, they were going to be the next victim. And it was that serious. And so, how do we overcome some of our own internal ethnic, you know, um, rules that may or not be helpful in the fight against bullying?
Well, if I could interject just real quick, because what you said really hit on the point. I worked at a campus that was 96% African American. So stitches
Okay.
get, stitches get stitches, ditches, and everything like that. But
Right.
what really did help us on our campus was building a relationship with our students so that they built up that trust. So I
Mm.
mean, when you build up that trust with students, they Miss E, did you know such and such was gonna have a fight today? They would
Right.
be all over it. But it was necessary to put in the work and to build those relationships so that they knew that they could trust you with that information and that you would utilize it in order to help and not just to say, oh, well, this person told me such and such and such. So that's what
Right.
I found really helped, creating that space that students could come to and utilize in order to talk about what was going on, because they're just as worried about things that are situations happening, violent situations happening in their community, their school community and outside community, just like anyone else. And so creating that space really helped them to feel comfortable to come to me as a person and to trust me and say, this is what's going on, Miss E. What you gonna do about it?
And I'll say this, our district specifically, and I know many districts have also adopted anonymous reporting, right?
Mhm.
So we have an app that students can download, access from the website. It's everywhere. It's in our district app. It's a standalone app. So that for those students who, for whatever reason, cultural norms, stigma, fear of retaliation, can anonymously report anything that they feel might be a threat or danger to
Yeah.
them. And that has been very important for us because, believe it or not, Dr. Dean, we have parents who are reluctant to address issues because they feel like, well, when I was coming up in school, if your parents came up there causing a problem, then the teachers would be mean to you. And I don't want that to
Mm.
happen, right? So
Right.
our anonymous reporting allows any parent to report anything, any staff member, any student, and that has helped as well. And so we encourage districts to adopt those type of tools. That's when the technology can be helpful.
Mm.
right? And then what happens for us is when we get that anonymous report, it immediately goes to that campus that you've identified where the concern is, as well as our security department. And they do not wait. They jump on it immediately and address the concern.
Absolutely.
And so
Right.
we're trying to make it, because again, we understand that from a cultural perspective, right? We're here in Texas, and it's not just about African Americans having that code, but some of our good old cowboys around here feel the same way. There are just some
Right.
ways culturally from
Right.
this area where we're also in the Bible Belt. There are
Yeah.
so many layers of why that exists, that stigma of reporting can exist. And so things like our anonymous reporting app are what we really use as our answer to address that and let students know that it truly is anonymous. And I've had parents say, now, is it really anonymous? And I always say, yeah, like, did you put your name in there? so,
Okay.
so we want them to feel safe and secure. But like Miss E said, but even beyond that, we want to have a relationship with our folks so they know to call us. And we've got some regular reporters that will tell us when things are happening in the community so we can prepare and be aware of those things.
That's good. So we had a question from Deanna, and I thought I was going to get back to it. She wanted us to kind of explore a little bit more about the connection between self-esteem and bullying, and how the self-esteem is impacted um, by bullying. And so I'll take the first piece, and then you can talk about how bullying. So our self-esteem is built on from multiple factors. Pretty much externally, right? And so our parents are kind of our primary caregivers, are our primary architects of our self-esteem, right? And they tell you, if your parents are always touching you and telling you how great you are, that helps build your self-esteem. You've got some mean parents and parents that were abused may have lower self-esteem, things of those nature. So that self-esteem gets built and constructed by your primary caregivers. When you enter into other settings, that self-esteem is either reinforced or eroded in any kind of way. So if they go somewhere, they go to a friend's house and somebody says, "Oh, you're so pretty," that self-esteem gets reinforced, right? If you go somewhere and you get something, "Oh my God, who is this? Why did you bring this clown?" Then it gets eroded. And so there's this constant fluctuation of our self-esteem. When with children and adolescents, it becomes even more problematic because they have an underdeveloped frontal lobe in their brain, and that frontal lobe is what controls reasoning and judgment. And so that's why there is this catastrophizing of things when they have something go wrong. Oh my God, the world is going to end. No, it's not. You got to be able to put it all thing in context. But they don't have that fully developed frontal lobe, so they don't really understand that. It's all based on emotions. And so that self-esteem fluctuation is much more random in children and adolescents than it is in adults. And that's why it can be much more heavily impacted by bullying. And so that's my piece of it. And I'm going to throw it to whoever wants to take that on and talk about the impact that bullying can have on it.
You want me to go, Miss E, or you want to start?
It's no problem. Yes, I can go. That's no
Go
problem.
ahead. Go, Miss E.
Yeah. So yeah, in some of the same points, as far as especially adolescent students, they already have a lot of things going on, for lack of a better term to use. They have hormonal changes. They are not secure with themselves. And just speaking from working with middle school students and secondary students, this is what you see a lot. So remember that we talked about bullying being that power struggle there. That so the same thing, if you are steadily having your power pulled away from you, or you're feeling lower each time as your power, and these are repeated acts that are happening. So your power is continuously being pulled away, and stripped. And we talked about how being empowered helped us to use our voice and things. But if you lose your power, then you lose your voice, you lose the feeling, that your confident feeling in yourself to be able to react or talk, or to be able to make friends and things of that nature. So we can see that bullying really does erode at just the nature of bullying, that imbalance of power. It continues to erode over time as these repeated incidents continue to occur. And this is how you start to feel about yourself. You can start to internalize all of these things that are being said or that are being done to you. So when you begin to internalize those things, these are feelings that you begin to have about yourself. And so
Right.
your self-esteem continues to get lower and lower and lower because you begin to believe that these things are true and that
Right.
this is really who you are and what you are as a person because you weren't sure anyway at first. And now that you continuously get these negative, get treated negatively and get your power stripped away, then these are things that you internalize and it continues to wear away at who you feel that you really are.
Right. Right.
And one of the things we see, like there are some studies, and I was pulling up some numbers for us that indicate that about 72% of people, when questioned, will say they've been bullied in some way or another, right?
Wow.
And so what's interesting to me is this high number of people that say I at least had one encounter of someone who bullied me and who would, use that definition that we've identified as a definition for bullying. What's interesting though is how different people respond differently. So
Mhm.
I don't think that any of us are exempt or immune to what Miss E is describing, having our self-esteem and our confidence stripped away. And really, I think on some levels, and again, you're the doctor here, Dr. Dean. When I think about even like when you think about your performance evaluation at work, right?
Mhm.
Or or something that recently came up that caused you to be, looked at both positive and negative. So let's say you get a performance evaluation at work, it seems like our mind automatically may look at that one area that we need to grow and not the 72 areas where we were exceptional, right? So
Right.
something in our minds and in our brains tends to linger towards the things that people think are wrong with us and that we aren't doing well. And so, one of the things we talked about this throughout the day, I would say, is making sure that we are staying connected with our children, staying connected to the things that are positive and really focusing on those positive dividends. And I will say this too, and I've said this to families, there are some times when your child is in an environment for whatever reason, because I've had parents say, well, she started it, and so she's just going to have to deal with it.
Mhm.
There are some times in which removing your child from that environment to start afresh or to do something different are appropriate. Now, it's not appropriate every single time. I'm not
Right.
saying that. And I know not every family is able to do that. But there are some times when a situation has become so volatile that it is dangerous for a child to remain where they are.
Right.
But again, but we've all, not all, but the vast majority of us have experienced it in some forms, and we remember that feeling.
Can I just mention
Absolutely.
a real quick point
Sure.
on that, just to piggyback off of that? And also, as students grow older, they are more affected by what peers say rather
Mhm.
than what their parents say. And so that also has a lot to do with the lowering of self-esteem because even if my parents say that I'm the best thing in the world, I'm valuing more of what my peers say rather than what my parents say. So,
Yeah, look, I deal with that every day.
Yeah, because we don't,
well, we all.
they don't think we know anything as
Oh,
parents.
I know nothing. I know nothing. I'm like, I'm just the person that just drives you to school. That's my job. I'm just that dude. So, so yeah, absolutely. I completely agree in terms of just and you think about and you see the language starts to change, right? And that it goes from somebody calling someone ugly or calling someone dumb to that person internalizing that messaging and saying, I am ugly, I am dumb, right? And so that becomes who they are and that becomes how they describe themselves. And then therefore later in life, they accept less because they say, I am lesser than other people. And so they accept less. And so they find themselves becoming susceptible to abusive relationships because in terms of the people that they choose as a mate, they choose somebody that's more dominating and abusive because I deserve less. I don't deserve a healthy, loving, supportive partner. I deserve somebody that's going to dominate me. And so all of those things, that self-esteem piece does carry on throughout life. And so we have to do a job as parents, administrators, teachers, community members, all of us have to work together in unison to be able to overcome that, because that can really have a detrimental effect up to and including someone choosing to end their own life. And so that's the reality of what we're facing. So this is a life or death messaging. So
Right.
we've talked a lot tonight about the negative. So we're going to end this program with the positives. What are some things that we can do? What are some tools that we can give our audience, that we can give parents, that we can give other administrators to be able to identify and help a child through a situation that they might be faced with being bullied?
I'm going to say, see something, say something.
Okay.
And before I elaborate on that, and I wanted to say this at the start of the program, Dr. Dean, it is also a purple month. So October is also Domestic Violence Awareness Month, right?
Okay.
So
Yep.
hit on that, like that goes, you're right, it goes hand in hand. It can go hand in hand. But what I would say to students, teachers, parents, everyone, if you see something, say something. If you see a child acting out of character, say something. If you see someone sitting alone by themselves, say something. If we really want to see positive change, we have to all be willing to be the person that says something and does something when we see something that doesn't look right, sound right, smell right. It just ain't right. So that would be my advice for us. See something, say something. And I know as parents, that's hard, right? Because I've had parents come to me and say, I'm worried about my niece and I don't want to tell my sister because she's going to jump on me, right? But we have to be willing to say something, because sometimes the people closest to us can't get the response, right? My child may not be as eager to tell me, because as they get older, those relationships sometimes can get tricky. But as trusting adults who care about the next generation in general, we have to be willing to say something when we see something, and really be the mediator when kids and folks can't do it for themselves.
And yeah, and also something that's very important is to, as we mentioned, prevent. So as parents, helping our students or helping our kids build that armor that they need in order to go through difficulties, because we know that that's a part of life. So to be able to go through difficulties, to have a voice, to make sure to help people to understand how to treat them. So all of those things are things that we can equip our kids with to help them to be able to navigate through these deep waters called life. I think that is so important, and parents really do have a huge impact on their students when it comes to preventing, because there may be something that happens at school that makes you feel bad, or there may be bullying that happens. Okay, so what is it that you're going to do even before it occurs? This is how you hold up under those difficult and trying times. Helping our students to understand that and to realize that, I think, is extremely important. And then utilizing the resources we have on the campus. We got principals, we have administrators, we have school counselors. All individuals are willing to help in order for our students to be safe. And I'm just biased because I was a school counselor, but school counselors have I'm just biased, y'all. I'm gonna just be honest.
I think
Tons of resources in order to provide for families to help to protect their student, and so their student can be safe. So just keeping those things in mind are things that we can do as a group, as parents, as administrators, as stakeholders, to be able to keep our kids in a safe environment at school.
And Dr. Dean, I gotta say this one last thing. And
you got the most talkingest people in the district.
I know, Dr. Dean invited us. He may not invite us anymore.
No. This is you're on the panel.
Because it's a high note, right? We're on a high note.
Yeah.
All the things that Miss E said about, having your voice, using your voice, taking care, getting the resources, I would say for our grown-up adults in the audience, model that thing, right? You got to model that for your child.
Such a good
because
point.
I'm going to tell you, during COVID, during isolation, during funeral after funeral after funeral, listening and hearing about the death of Colin Powell today, I wept, right? We've got to model self-care. we've got to
Yes.
model self-confidence. If I'm the mother of two young girls, but I'm always talking about I'm fat and I need to do this and I'm girl, and oh, my pants don't fit. Are
Mhm.
we modeling what self-esteem looks like? Are we
Right.
modeling confidence? Are we modeling voice? Are we modeling that power? Or are we modeling self-down talk? And
Yes.
so that would also be my advice, especially to the moms on the call, because it is hitting our girls harder statistically than anyone else, this self-image and this body image that we're seeing on social media. So
Oh,
Right.
that would be a takeaway I would say as well, is we've got to model as grown folks what it looks like to be the voice, to be the change, to be healthy, to be whole, to be well, and to be wise. We've got to live that
yes,
before them so they know what it looks like.
absolutely.
I
Yes.
would add my 2 cents on that is one, you have to show some vulnerability
That too.
as an adult,
Oh,
and
man.
so too often we try to present ourselves as the perfect parent,
That's right.
that
Yes.
we didn't have any challenges in our lives, or the perfect teacher, the perfect principal, whatever role
Right.
we're in. And
Yes.
that child says, well, they were perfect, so I can't relate. But if you can share, if you can bring down that wall a little bit, let the behind the curtain appropriately, of course, that and show some vulnerability and say, hey, look, I felt dealt with these same challenges. Your child is more, or whatever child you're dealing with, whether it's your child or a child you're counseling, will have will respond to that so much better than it is if you just try to present all these perfect, things about how you just overcome this and overcome that, and you climb every wall and you conquer every mountain that comes your way, which we all know that's not the truth.
Break every chain.
Right. So we just doing everything, right? And the second thing I will say is that as parents in particular, be careful about sending mixed messages. And what I mean by that is sometimes parents get so happy in terms of telling everybody how well their child is doing, and then don't engage with them when they're not doing something that they could share to the world.
Yep.
And what happens is you're sending a mixed message to your child is, my value is only when I could do something to make you happy.
Mm. Yep.
And that is just as impactful on that child's self-esteem as being, abusive is, because you're telling them they
Absolutely.
have no value if you're not doing something to make me feel good.
Exactly.
And so we have to be able to teach our children that they are valued whether they're doing something that's great, whether they're running, scoring touchdowns, or whether they're just in the stands watching the game. They
Right.
are just as valuable. We've got to send that message. And so parents, we've got to be really, really cognizant of what messaging we're sending to our parents. So that's the only two things that I would add to what y'all said to this conversation. So I definitely want to say I really thoroughly enjoyed this. This was chicken soup for my soul today. um, and because it offers some perspective, right? We move through life, and especially in the role that I serve here, a Black doctor. Sometimes you get too caught up in, I got to do this, I got to do that, I gotta do that. And I might need to go downstairs and just pick up the video control paddle and let my son beat my head in NBA 2 Live, right?
There you go.
And just for his own self-esteem and not be. So I need to do that. So I think I will go do that, and just he can feel better about himself, and I
Do
can
it.
go cry.
Right, right. Lift that self-esteem.
Well, thank you, Ms. Culpepper. You are now official BDO certified official. So anytime we need you to come back, you're more than welcome to come back. Miss E, one more appearance, and you BDO certified.
Oh
I
man,
know,
okay.
I
Let
know,
me.
I know. We're definitely gonna have you back as well. Thank you,
Oh,
everybody, for
thank you. It
watching.
was
Thank
such a
you all
pleasure.
for being a participant. I hope we were able to give you some tools and techniques to help your child, or whomever, child in your neighborhood, niece, nephew, whomever, overcome the negative aspects of bullying so they can live and be the person that they are meant to be on this planet. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.